Germany, up until recently the great bastion of stability and driver of prosperity throughout Europe, is broken. And I'm not exaggerating. Its economic model is in trouble. Crime and integration problems for millions of immigrants have skyrocketed. The political framework is more fragmented and polarized than ever. And now, to top it all off, the arrival of the Trump administration has completely turned everything upside down, to the point that the future chancellor has been very clear. Europe has to prepare for a break with the United States. VisualPolitik community. The elections in Germany have just been held. They were elections with the highest level of participation since 1987, and to tell the truth, there haven't been many surprises. Basically, what was expected to happen has happened, with some nuances. On the one hand, the CDU, Germany's historic centre-right party, has won the elections, albeit with slightly less support than expected. But it doesn't matter, because this man you see on the screen, Friedrich Merz, will probably become the new Chancellor of Germany. We will tell you more about him later. On the other hand, we have the real winners of these elections, or at least, how should I put it, the emotional winners of the elections. And who are these emotional winners? Well, we're talking about two political formations, each of them located at either end of the political spectrum. First, Alternative for Germany. Because yes, this time the forecasts came true. The AfD have taken just over 20% of the vote, doubling its 2021 results and becoming the country's second largest political force. And we're talking about a political formation that has become increasingly radicalized. Then in second place, as emotional winners of the election day, we also have the hard left of Die Linke, a formation that has spent the campaign launching messages like these.
Don't give up, resist fascism, occupy the barricades.
By the way, this lady's nickname is nothing less than the Queen of TikTok. Well, the fact is that in these elections, this formation has won about 4 million votes. This means that this political formation has gone from being a party on the verge of extinction to being at the heart of German politics.
I have always believed that we on the left would rise up again, but more than 8% is unimaginably big.
And you know what? This vertical rise of two parties, so slanted to the extremes on each side of the spectrum, has had a lot to do with it. Exactly. The young people have turned to them. They have voted for them massively. These two political formations have been the overwhelming choice among those under 34 years of age. And take note, because if we add BSW, a Stalinist-style party, then the result is that more than 50% of the votes of the youngest have gone to these three radical formations. So what does this mean? Probably that social media has completely changed the way politics is done. For example, Die Linke's speeches have become tremendously popular on platforms such as TikTok. And what is the problem with that? Well, the result of this new way of doing politics tends to be a vote much more inclined to the extreme parties. And you know who's been working the social media platforms to the hilt for years? Exactly, Putin's Russia. But we'll talk about that another day. On top of that, the rise of the AfD, as we told you in our last video, has a lot to do with an unresolved rift between the two Germanys, with the former GDR territories being socially and politically further and further away from West Germany. Here the numbers leave no room for doubt. We're practically talking about two completely different countries. Well, in any case, before moving on to what's really important, we can say that the results in Germany can be summarized as follows. The CDU has won, but has not gained enough support to remain the single governing party. They'll have to find a partner to form a government. AfD continues to gain support like crazy. Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats have collapsed. Die Linke's hard left have pulled off a surprise by bursting out among younger voters. And then the Greens are still there, but this time they won't make much of a difference. They're no longer needed. In short, Germany will continue to have a highly fragmented parliament, but this time it would also be much more skewed towards the extremes. And that's why it's most likely that the new government to be formed will emerge from a large coalition agreement between the CDU and the Social Democrats, but we'll talk about that later. VisualPolitik community, these were the results. This is basically the most straightforward part of this video. Now, it's time to analyze the consequences of an election that may define not only the future of Germany, but of Europe as a whole. And pay attention, because it seems that there may be some bends ahead. Check out these statements by the man who's going to be the new Chancellor of Germany.
I am in close contact with many EU prime ministers and heads of state, and for me, it is an absolute priority to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that we achieve independence from the USA, step by step.
Now, what is going to happen to Germany, and how on earth did we get here? Well, that's what we're going to look at next.
German foundations collapse.
The first thing that we need to know is how the hell we got here. Why do Germans seem to be increasingly throwing themselves into the arms of political forces that are deeply biased towards the extremes? Well, you see, this has a lot to do with what Robin Winkler said not long ago. The chief economist of Deutsche Bank in Germany described the current situation in Germany as nothing less than the most pronounced crisis since the post-war period. The economy is not growing. Just look at this graph. In it, we can see how the German economic engine has completely seized up. Factories are now closing, and industrial production has plummeted by almost 20% since 2017. Major domestic manufacturers such as the Volkswagen Group are mired in an unprecedented crisis. And that's not all. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the closure of nuclear plants decreed by Angela Merkel, the price of energy has more than tripled. The large migration waves also from the Merkel era have resulted in much higher crime rates. And to top it all off, German infrastructure is falling apart. And we're not just talking about roads, ports, and airports, we're also talking about other types of infrastructure that in today's world can also be absolutely critical. Do you want a concrete example? Well, look at this. While in Spain, 90% of internet connections are made with fiber cables, in Germany this percentage is only 11%. In other words, it seems to be all bad news in Germany lately. High taxes, heavy regulations, bad energy decisions with the closure of nuclear plants, along with cotton candy policies from Brussels are sweeping them away. And logically, to a large extent, all of this explains the results we've seen in these latest elections. That is exactly how we got here. By the way, in several videos over on VisualPolitik, we have told you many more details about the collapse that Germany's suffering, so if you want to know more, just stop by. But having said that, the question is, what next? Who is Friedrich Merz, and what exactly does he stand for? Well, let's take a look.
Are there curves ahead?
The new government is not going to have it easy. It will have to deal with the economic crisis, with the need to rebuild its armed forces, with Donald Trump's constant prodding, with the threat of Vladimir Putin, and with the peace negotiations in Ukraine. At the head of this government will almost certainly be CDU leader Friedrich Merz, a politician with deep pockets thanks to his work at the American fund manager BlackRock, and who is popularly known as the anti-Merkel. Not only because he doesn't seem to get along at all with her, but also because he holds very different positions in absolutely crucial areas. For example, Merz has tough positions on immigration. He more or less defends nuclear energy, tax cuts, and even seems to support ending the limit on public debt established in the country's own constitution. In other words, a potential anti-Merkel coming from the same party. A guy who has acknowledged having none other than Ronald Reagan as one of his great political role models. Nevertheless, this is probably his most important challenge.
Germany's election winner pledges independence from US. I wouldn't have thought I'd have to say something like that, but after Donald Trump's statements, it is clear that the Americans, at least this American government, are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe.
And take note, because the almost certain next German Chancellor has said that he's not even sure that NATO has a future. VisualPolitik community. At this time, the Germans, at least the German politicians of the long-standing parties, have seen the writing on the wall. On the one hand, they know that the severing of trade ties with the United States could provoke an economic earthquake in the country. Until now, they thought they could handle it, but now they're not at all sure they can. So they need to find a new path, and they need it urgently. On the other hand, and as unrealistic as it sounds, German politicians have also realized something else. A large-scale hybrid or conventional warfare attack by Russia against EU territory without US protection could be devastating for the continent. In some parts of Europe, such as Spain or Italy, this scenario may seem far-fetched, but the truth is that the closer you get to the border with Russia, Europeans are becoming less and less trusting. And that's why Friedrich Merz is basically saying that now is the time to take the bull by the horns. Either you act quickly, or you run the risk that the economic and political crisis will spread, and in the end, the whole of Europe will fall under the control of radical parties with one common characteristic: their sympathy with the Kremlin. So what we can now expect from their government seems to fall into roughly 3 case scenarios. First, more leadership in Europe, something that Scholz has lacked in recent years. Second, more military spending to start rebuilding the German armed forces once and for all. And third, a totally new economic policy, with more government spending and probably lower taxes. This is basically what the new Chancellor has promised, and what we could expect if he keeps his word.
I know the scale of the challenge ahead. I approach this with the utmost respect, and I know that it will not be easy.
The fact that Friedrich Merz himself comes from the private sector and the productive economy is good news. Even so, Houston, we have a problem. We're talking about Germany, the CDU, and that they're going to need the votes of the Social Democrats. And why do I say that all this is a problem? Well, basically because it was the CDU that created all the problems now facing Germany, a country that has been known for decades for its immobility, and because the Social Democrats will almost certainly act as a brake on many of the announced changes. What's more, the parties against continuing to actively support Ukraine, AfD and Die Linke, have gained a lot of seats in parliament, a sufficient number to establish a blocking minority. We'll see what happens, but that's going to be another headache for sure. So, between the Social Democrats, lukewarm CDU, and the political stalemate, maybe things won't change that much. But even if they don't change that much, it seems clear that Germany's political course will change, and with it, probably that of the entire European Union. Our perception? Well, in principle, we think that this election, regardless of whether it will promote a more or less watered-down government, must be good news for a European Union that urgently needs to find a new political and economic direction. This new Chancellor may be that opportunity. So, from that point of view at least, we think Europe is slightly better off today than it was last week. That, my friends, is our take on these election results. Things won't change much, but what will change is likely to change for the better. So will this be an opportunity to start building a new Europe? Will the election of Friedrich Merz put a brake on Vladimir Putin's expansionist aspirations? Will the Germans be determined once and for all to plunge into a new era of military reconstruction, energy independence, and support for Ukraine? Well, only time will tell. The problem? Germany has not exactly been a country famous in recent years for being able to show leadership and deal with problems. But anyway, we'll see if this time it's different. All of us here on VisualPolitik will be following this matter very closely. But for now, tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so to keep up to date with all the latest news. All the best, I'll see you next time.